Hey y'all, I'm Ralper, and welcome to Skyrim Scripting. This is part of our series where we are learning how to create SKSE, or Skyrim Script Extender plugins in C++. And in this episode, we're finally going to work with some of the objects in the game, things that represent stuff like NPCs, or a sweet roll, or a door, or a spell, or a spell's magical effect. All of these things have an interface for you to work with them. If you are used to papyrus scripting, there are a number of different papyrus scripts for interacting with forms, object references, spells, and so on. And it's similar when we're using the common lib library, which is what we're using to create our SKSE plugins. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're just going to play around with learning the basic interfaces for how to work with forms, essentially, if you're familiar with forms. So we've got our SKSE templates. I happen to have one called Forms. It shows how to do things like loop through and find all the soups in the game. I might keep that one open on a second monitor to reference it in this episode, because we're basically going to build what that one has. So feel free to download it and poke around. I'm going to basically try and recreate what it has. Hello World doesn't have logging, so I'm going to create a new SKSE plugin that has some logs. So I'm going to use the SKSE template for logging. Just going to go ahead and download it. So we're not going to turn this into a real project. We're just kind of playing around. Clone that down. Great. Okay, let's go ahead and open that puppy up. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to rename the mod file that gets created from using log files to like playing with forms, because it's really form objects that we're going to be messing with here. Okay. And now this plugin CPP, has some stuff about a logger, because this template is all about logging. We'll keep the logger in place, but we don't care about any of these example log messages that it was putting out or anything like that. And this is kind of the bare bones structure of a regular SKSE plugin. Let me let the CMake configure finish so that these angry red underlines disappear. Okay, everything is loaded. Let's start off by doing something like looking up a sweet roll in the game, and we can look up some of the attributes that are available on a sweet roll. So let's search for Scram sweet roll. No, not a creature. I don't know about that. Scam's version. Here we go. Here's a sweet roll. It has a certain weight, a gold value, etc., etc. And here's its form identifier. Let's look it up using its identifier to start with, just to kick things off. So how would we do that? So let's say we have form ID equals, and it's hexadecimal. So just like in Papyrus, you do it like this. How would we look it up? Like in Papyrus, it'd be like game get form. So we've got something similar. Re is generally what all of the common lib library things are going to be accessible underneath for reverse engineering. Task form. And then if you type lookup, you'll find that there's a couple of different lookups. There's four, really two variants of two functions each. You can look up by ID, which is what we're going to do, and it takes a form ID. Ooh, what is that? And there's lookup by editor ID, which takes a string. So we'll try both of these. So look up form ID. What is a form ID? Well, let's see if we can poke around. Well, let's say reform ID x equals 5 or something, I don't know. There we go. If I just hover over it, I can see that form ID is actually just an alias. In their C++, they have using form ID equals unsigned 32-bit integer. So it's just wherever you see form ID, you can use an integer freely. It's just kind of a reference, an alias for numbers. So we can go ahead and say form ID. And this will give us back a pointer to a form. So we can say auto form equals, but because it gives us back that little star, we would want to add our little star here. And if you're using Visual Studio Code and you don't see these little bits pop up here, don't worry about that. I'm going to have an episode showing how to set up Clang D optionally, which adds these little bits of helpful information to my C++ code. Okay, you get that for free, I think, in C-Line, which is a JetBrains editor. All right, so I'll tell you right now that this will explode. We could run it, I could prove it, we could try and debug it, etc. Definitely check out the episode I'm going to make on debuggers. But the reason that this won't work is because whenever this code runs right here, like all of this code, this actually runs before the Skyrim game gets loaded. So SKSE loader, the SKSE executable that we use to run the game, it boots up, it loads all of the DLLs and data SKSE plugins, and then everything boots up. It boots up the game. So forms aren't even available. What we need to do is wait for all of the data to be loaded. That's the message that SKSE sends. It's called data loaded. And if you were with us in the SKSE system events episode, we kind of looked at how to listen for system events. So what if we add a function called like on data loaded? And that is the function where we'll do things like look up forms. Okay, and void just means it returns nothing. You can't have a function without that. Okay, so how do we wait for data loaded to happen? What I'm going to do is I'm going to, from SKSE, : so like some stuff is under reverse engineering, : this tends to be the common lib libraries, and then SKSE tends to have what I call runtime things. There's some overlap, but so we'll say get messaging interface, just like we did in the episode on SKSE events. And you register a listener, and it's an event callback. And as we saw, an event callback is, once this goes, come on, a function that accepts a message, and based on where we are, we know that's an SKSE messaging interface message, a pointer to one. So let's give it a function that is basically a message listener. We'll call it like on message, and we'll just make it here. We'll say void, like it said there, this needs to be void and accepts a message on message. The message is kind of under a namespace. It's SKSE messaging interface message. And it's a little star. It's a pointer. And then we'll just say if the message type equals, and then SKSE messaging interface has these little K enums. They just happen to be K. You don't need K for an enumeration in C++. It's just what they did. And we want data loaded. So data loaded. If data loaded, then let's just call on data loaded. There we go. And so this is our plugin. We'll actually no longer need to look at SKSE plugin load. All it does is set up our logger and register a message listener. And then on message, whenever a message is data loaded, it calls data loaded. So we don't need that either. And so here we are. So what do we want to do with our form? Let's log some stuff. Let's just log the name of the form and maybe how much gold it costs. So we could start to look at what's available on a form by just going to form and hitting dot. You could also hit this little arrow, dash, and then the angle thing. Mine ends up in my editor looking like a real arrow. Should turn that off because it probably confuses people, as they're called ligatures, but it's really just the same as this. My editor just, boop, if you put them together, makes it look like that. But even though it's a pointer, which means you would use the arrow, but most editors you can just hit dot and it'll convert this to the arrow as need be. So what's available? Does this belong in a group? Is it dangerous? Is it playable? That's presumably for races and stuff. We can get its name. We get the object type name. That's neat. All kinds of things. Some of these might blow up. Ooh, is it gold? Is it deleted? Is it a book? Let's type gold. So get gold value. That looks great. So the get gold value, that returns an integer, 32-bit sign for some reason, integer. So we've got that. let's say auto value equals. Then we can get name equals form get name. And then we can just print these out. Logger info, just name value. And let's give that a shot. Let's compile that. While it compiles, let's go ahead and open up Mod Organizer 2 because I happen to have mine configured, just like I did in that Hello World introductory episode, to spit out new mods into my mods folder, which is used by Mod Organizer 2. You could set up the same exact thing with Nexus, or with Vortex, excuse me. But you can also have these things deployed to your data directory directly if you want to. So to set that up as a reminder, just make sure that you read the README of whatever template it is you're using. And so for the logging template, for example, there's a project setup section. May have changed between right now and when you watch it, but this is what it says right now. And this is how you set it up to spit out your DLLs into the right place. All right, let's enable playing with forms. And we're going to be running this thing constantly, and it's constantly going to be running, and I don't want to exit it constantly. So I'm going to go to something that I will put on Nexus at some point. It's just a little mod that will automatically stop Skyrim as soon as the data loaded message has triggered. So let's install that. Great. This is going to be really nice throughout this episode, so that all I need to do is go to the Documents, My Games, Skyrim Special Edition, or Skyrim Special Edition GOG folder. And here in this folder, we should see our Playing with Forms mod log file show up as soon as the game loads. So I'm going to hit a little button. That's a little shortcut for me for doing that. And there we have a Playing with Forms. Okay, and it's about to close as soon as data loaded. So once that spinner stops, it's just going to close. That's just my little helper. I'm going to use a log expert for our looking at this Playing with Forms. Log expert isn't like the best with small files that only log a little bit. So sometimes all it means is when I use it, I might occasionally have to refresh. Which I happen to know is F5. Here, reload, you could just reload. So a sweet roll's value is 2 gold. Cool, good to know, good to know. This stuff is a little bit distracting, so I'm gonna do something a little teeny bit advanced. We're gonna say the logger that's used, as you may know from the logger episode, though we didn't look at too much detail. Set the pattern. Whoops. I'm going to set the log pattern to only print out what we actually log. And I happen to know that %v will do that. So cool. Next time we log, it won't have all this nonsense. It'll just say sweet roll and value. So we've got a sweet roll. That's cool. What if we want all the food in the game? Or how about we want to, I don't know, we're getting this as a form, but what if we want something more specific than a form, like an actor or a spell? Like if we type form.magic, we can find out if it's a magic item, but we can't like find its magic effects. Maybe I want to get the spells that an actor has. Maybe let's go get all the spells that, is it Mercurio? Did I spell it right? That this guy has. So let's try and get that actor by name. Let's delete this stuff and let's say Mercurio equals has form lookup by ID. How about by editor ID? Mercurio ref. I'm just straight up guessing here. We can open up Creation Kit or SSE Edit and look at some of these available things. I could also just go to any website that talks about this guy, and they'll probably have a reference identifier. His form ID is right here. Sometimes they'll have the editor ID and things of that nature as well, but not always. So let's look up by, let's hold off on editor ID. Let's look up by ID. So that's his editor ID. And so I want to get his spells, right? Well, if I type mercurio.spell, there's nothing there. It's because he's not an actor, he's a form. And so in Papyrus, we would maybe do a cast and say form as actor. How do we do something like that here? Well, that goes back to why test form lookup, let's say by ID even, has multiple types. There's one here, which is what we're doing, just passing a number, a form ID, but then there's one that also you pass a form ID, but it has these strange brackets and you pass a class. Well, if we call that type, we specify what form type we want returned. And I think there's something called reactor. I hope so. Might be test actor. I think it's actor. And pass in the form ID. So really this is what we want. And we'll end up with, I'll make this one out. This one, my editor automatically tells me, which yours may or may not, no worries if it doesn't, tells me that this is going to return an actor pointer. So again, because it's a little pointer, it's good for us to put the little star next to the auto. Now that we have an actor, now remember, this is an actor, which is an object reference. It's the exact actor in the game. Mercurio, if you're not super familiar with modding games, has both a reference ID, which is the exact instance of him in the game, and a base ID. This is the base actor. Sometimes there can be multiple instances of the same like base constructed kind of actor, like for bandits or something, and so this would be the base ID for him. This won't be an actor, this will be an actor base. And is there an actor base? I don't know. Usually for these types of things, what I end up doing honestly is I go and I look for common lib. In this case, I'm looking for common lib ng. But you could look at the common lib by power of 3 or the one by Ryan, whichever one that you are using, you should download it. I will have episodes on how to use the other versions of common lib, but ng is just so much, at the time of recording, simpler because you can compile your DLL once and it will work for, you know, GOG and AE and SE and VR, etc., etc. And I don't like leaving the VR folks out. It always makes me sad. So if I download that, it's really nice to open this up in Visual Studio Code. Even if you use Visual Studio or CLine as your main editor, the reason is, if I just do edit, find in files, or Control-Shift-F, I can just type like spell, and a million things show up really quickly. 576 results in 70 files. Like a lot of stuff shows up. Like a lot of stuff shows up. Actor base, is that a thing? Hey, look, apparently there's a test actor base, and now I know that. You can also just do Control P and it pulls down a fuzzy finder. So I can just type actor and it's going to start to show me all the files where the file name is actor in it. So how about base? Apparently there's a thing called a test actor base. Cool. You know, I had to wait for some kids and stuff to stop playing outside, and I refilled my tea and I thought to myself, we should really be embarrassed for the state that we're in with SKSE. My solution for you to find out, hey, is test actor base a thing and what functions and fields does it have? Is for you to download the library's source code and get an editor that allows you to effectively search through it. It's 2023. We should have some generated documentation, and there should be some fucking comments on this stuff. It's absurd. So I'm really hoping that by this time next year, please, if your passion is documentation, go solve this. I spent my past 15 minutes while I was waiting for those kids, like literally looking up different C++ documentation, like solutions and different things that we could possibly do to generate docs for this. I really hope that the problem is there's multiple forks, and it's so like, where do you add the documentation? And do we need the documentation to sit outside of the source code so that you can generate it for multiple forks? What should we do? I don't know Power of Three. Is Power of Three like a cool guy or girl? Or like, are they like down with us going in and sending pull requests for documentation? Because the dev branch that Power of Three has is, I feel like the canonical AE branch, at least right now. I think SE is dead. But what about Alan's VR branch? Is it Alan? Is anyone keeping track of VR? For now, look in the source code. So get a tool that makes it really easy for you to search in the source code. And for me, I'm going to say that's Visual Studio Code. It's Visual Studio Code because you can Control-Shift-F, magic effect. Bam, 39 results. Bam. You want to spell cast a spell? Oh, cast means a bunch of things. Can I cast spell maybe? Oh, there's some spell cast stuff. Cast spell, blah, blah, blah. This is a little regular expression. And you can just do things like type event and how about S event? These are all the different types of events. For now, ladies and jelly spoons, until we solve this scenario where we are very low on documentation. I was modding the game Fallout 2 over the summer. They have way better documentation for their reverse engineered library than we do. But, I mean, their documentation could also use love, but at least they had a GitHub hosted pages site with like a bunch of examples and stuff. So that's why we're here. That's why we're here. We're here to make this better, right? We're here to make this better. Let's make it better. And in the meantime, let's just learn how to do some stuff. So if we've got Mercurio here, Mercurio, add spell, deselect spell, has spell, remove spell. Do we need the base actor? Get actor base. Has a spell list. Get spell list. What does that return? I'm just gonna say auto spells equals and let my editor do the hard work. Apparently it returns a pointer to a spell data. Well, let's just go down the hitting the dot button rabbit hole. Spells dot. Number of leveled spells, number of spells, spells. Okay, cool. Cool. So how about I've never done this before. Int I equals 0, I is less than, and really should be like an unsigned, but whatever. Or a size T. Spells, num spells. Auto spell equals spells I. Does that work? It's a spell item. And it's really going to be that because it's a pointer. Get name. It's a spell. It's a spell item, which is probably a spell. So it's a logger info. Let's just do this in the spell name. Yeah. Let's say logger info blah as blah spells. And we'll pass Mercurio. Really, we need his actor base get name. That's where the name exists. And then spells, num spells. Might break, might work. Well, what did I do? Find out if it compiles. What did I do right there at the very end? What did I do weird and wrong? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Missing a semicolon. I like hit a button. Undo. Undo. Redo. Redo. Ah. I++. I don't know what you're supposed to use for a size type. Hopefully the red underline goes away and we can run the game and we should see all of Mercurio's spells or it will crash. I don't know. Let's find out. We're just playing around. Launching. As soon as the data is ready. Come on. Crash. Fun fact. Mercurio is a temporary placed object in the Rift and Bee and Barb. And I couldn't get him to show up unless I actually went into the Bee and Barb in terms of getting his form ID. Fun times. Whereas some other references seem to be permanent. Here's much testing I actually did to get him to show up. That's stuff that we'll go over in the game events episode. So instead of getting Mercurio directly, let's get the Mercurio base actor, the actor base. Let's say auto Mercurio base equals retest form, or I could get a permanent reference. I could get Sven or someone, but I want to see Mercurio just because he's a hireling that's supposed to be a mage. I just thought he would be a fun one to get. I should also be able to get him by his form lookup by editor ID. And it should be a test actor base. And I know from looking it up in SSE edit just now that it should be hireling Mercurio. Now that might not work if you don't have Power of Three's tweaks installed, which make it so that the game doesn't get rid of a lot of editor IDs that normally get filtered out when you run the game. So let's try this. Base. Mercurio base. Let's see if it works. Build. Okay, get actor base on an actor returns an test NPC, not an actor base like it does in Papyrus. So it's a test NPC that we want. Let's try this. This is why we need documentation. But welcome to the world of SKSE development. I'm hoping it gets easier for folks over the coming years. But it is so much fun and it's so worth it. And I hope that we can help one another make this easier. All right, we want his spells. There we go. He's got 8 spells. We did a thing. Lightning bolt, firebolt, chain lightning, turn undead, fast healing, blah, 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 blah. It is worth calling out that we did use hireling Mercurio as an editor ID. We would have wanted to say lookup by form ID if we didn't have Power of Three's tweaks installed. I'm pretty sure if I turn that off and I run the game again, I think it's just going to crash when we try and look up by. Yep, it just crashes because we try and look up by hireling Mercurio, but hireling Mercurio returns nothing, and so the game crashes. Okay, so what else do we want to be able to do? I just want to empower you for a couple more minutes with more things that you can do. We know how to look up forms. We know how to kind of look around common lib. We know how to get a form of a certain type. Like, for example, we got a test NPC. we could get a sweet roll. Let's see if we get a sweet roll. Can we find out what form type easily a sweet roll is? Here, if we have Power of Three's tweaks installed, I can actually just say auto sweet roll. No, go, stop, stop, no, close. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. Sweet roll equals 3 test form. Look up by editor ID. I know it's a food sweet roll. And let's log our info form type blah. Sweet roll get name. Sweet roll get form type. Let's see if it just shows us a number or if we can get the type and see if that'll help us kind of figure out what type of form sweet roll is so that we could get more information about it. So let's run the game. Okay, it's an alchemy item. I do believe that there's a thing called an alchemy item in the common lib. So what if we try and get a sweet roll as a look by editor ID alchemy item? It should exist. Let's say if sweet roll logger info it exists, else logger info. Sake. Nope. We'll check is a sweet roll an actor. So whenever you pass this through, you can look up something and kind of guess its type. And it's okay to do. It's not going to break the game. It's just going to return a null pointer, and you can use an if conditional. So this says nope, sweet roll is not an actor, but is it an alchemy item? So in your code, you're really going to want to do a lot of, like, whenever you have one of these little pointers, you can say if and then the thing. We do this a lot in Papyrus. You get something and then you just say like if thing. You could check if thing equal none, and that's kind of the equivalent here. But in this case, we just want to check if thing, and it does the same. Okay, cool. Sweet roll does exist. Just want to show you that now that we have an alchemy item, I can do stuff like get its effects, which is pretty cool. Let's see, what is effects here? It's an array of effect. What if I say for auto effect in effects? What does effect become? An effect, cool. What does an effect have? It has a magnitude, a base effect, and some other stuff. So let's say base effect. Let's say logger info sweet roll has X effects. And so it'll be sweet roll get name, sweet roll effects size, and then we'll print them out. Logger info effect dot base effect full name. Might totally explode. In your SKSE coding, you'll find you end up wrapping all of your code in like a million conditionals of like, if this fails, if this fails, if this fails. It's really nice to learn how to use a debugger. So you just always boot up the game with a debugger. And then when things fail, at least it'll tell you where things failed. Cool, restore health and restore hunger small. Sweet roll has 2 effects, cool. So that's a cool thing. What if instead of getting, don't save. What if instead of getting the effects of just a sweet roll, which is an alchemy item, we want to get all of the alchemy items. So let's get all of the alchemy items. For that, I'm going to reference off screen to remember how to do it. We use the data handler, right? Cool, 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 cool. There's a retest data handler, and you get it singleton, and it has some cool stuff, such as get form array. And so get form array, you can pass it a form type, which sometimes is a type that you'll work with, or a class. So alchemy item. This should give us literally all the alchemy items. So we'll say auto alchemy items. All of them, not only in the game, but also those that are in mods as well. That little formatter just screwed us there. Let's say logger info. There are blah alchemy items. Alchemy items size. Come on. Oh, yeah. Get form array. Incompatible with initializer. Oh, no star. No star. Okay. I saw the star and I added a star, right? And it got angry at me. This is an array of things with stars. It's an array, VST array, and the type of thing that it's an array of are pointers to alchemy items. Could probably do a reference. Might work, might blow up. I don't know if the get form array is something that it builds or if there's a reference to it. Let's see if this works. Alchemy items dot size. Might work, might explode, we'll find out. Runs the game. Runs the game. We want to see how many alchemy items are in the game. Blows up. Cool, there are 488. That's not that bad. I happen to know that potions and foods are both alchemy items. And so I'm going to find soups. I'm going to say for auto item in alchemy items. If the item get name, I want to see if it contains full name dot contains soup, then logger info soup or something. The soup name. I'll explain the name thing in a second. Build this, like the full name versus get name. The minor little differences that I cared about. And it has to do with case sensitivity. You might know if you're a Papyrus developer that all strings in the game are case insensitive. That can be quite infuriating sometimes. If you're a C++ developer, your strings are all case sensitive. So how do you do a comparison? And in this case, I didn't know if folks would spell soup with a big S, a small s, yada, 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 yada. Here are all the soups, by the way, which are pretty cool. And so if I were to say, and someone in my Discord pointing this out to me, item.getName. That is a constant char array. It's a C string. That's what we call it. Const char star. It's a pointer to a character, which like is an array of characters. It's interesting. However, item has also, I just type name. It has a full name. Full name is a BS fixed string. Now, to handle the fact that most of the strings in the game are case insensitive, we have BS fixed string. It's very nice because if you have BS fixed string and you say like your hot potato soup is one of these, okay? Watch. If equals hot potato soup logger info found the soup. If I spelled that right, then hopefully it'll work. No, potato doesn't have an E. When I'm up in lowercase and all weird, it's sorry. Potato. Like tomato. Doesn't. Okay, cool. Let's see if it worked. Found the soup. Cool. So if you ever need to do case insensitive checks, see if the object, the string that you're checking against in Papyrus, or rather here in Common Lib, has a BS fixed string equivalent, or you can just take advantage of BS fixed string and say name equals BS fixed string and make one. And now you have one. And you can put another string in there. You can put a C string in there, a standard string in there, or whatever, and you'll end up with a fixed string, which is a insensitive one. Okay, so we figured out how to get all the soups and basically all the items of a certain type. What if we want literally all the items? This is what I'm going to show you last. If you want legit just all the forms. Of course, these are only all the forms that will be available at game start, right? Certain things, like we noticed with Mercurio, temporary objects might not be available until you go to the cell that they're in. So, frustrating. But here, I'm just going to copy and paste what I always do. This is what I always call it. You can say retest form get all forms. It returns a map from the ID of the form to a pointer to the form. But it's a pair of that with like a lock wrapper. And so this is really the map right here. This is like form ID to form. In my code, sometimes I call it literally every form in the game as a reminder to myself that I shouldn't be doing this very often. You will slow things down. But so form ID to form, we should be able to, here's the code that I use for it. Charmbarian helped me pull it together because my C++ was sucked at the time, but even still today, I wouldn't be great at this. Get all forms, and then for auto, bracket, ID comma form. Forget that it has those things there, and it looks like this. My editor kind of makes things look a little bit funky. It looks like this. For auto ID comma form, so this accesses the map. So here's, I guess this dereferences it. So all these stars and these ampersands can get a little confusing, which is why I want to show you this exact example here. So if you want all of them, you can loop through and you'll have access to both the ID and a pointer to the form itself. So in this case, for example, I'll run the same example that I have in the SKSE template. And this should print out every item that is more than 5,000 gold. We'll say, what's more than 6969 gold? We'll say, boy, oh boy, those are expensive. I wonder if anything is actually equal to 6969. So I'm going to make it equal to as well. There's a ligature for that. Looks weird. I should really not have ligatures on. Those things that make equal and arrows and everything like that in my font, like a single character, because I think it's probably confusing for y'all. In the rough draft version of the series, I'll do that. Looks like there's only two. I have trouble believing that, but two of them showed up. One that is almost 8,000, a Storm Bear armor, and then Imperial Dragon armor. I don't know why, I feel like there's more that's more expensive and it just kind of blew up maybe, but I don't know. We are at 45 minutes. I feel like that is more than enough working with game objects. I really hope that over the next year we start adding more documentation to Common Lab because it's such a fantastic library. So much effort has been put into it, so many hours, so many months, so many years of just blood, sweat, and tears into this lovely, lovely library. If anyone out there wants to help document it or find a way to share the love and make it easier for other folks to build plugins using this awesome library, I'd say let me know, but I don't know if I can help. Let the author know. Let Power of Three know. Let Ryan Kinsey know. Um, Thank you all, and as always, happy modding. I'll see you in the next one. Happy modding.